Yeah, hello and hi everyone. Great to virtually meet you. Yes, I'm Hephzi. I'm the founder of Equality Group and Onyx. In fact, this is my fourth business. I've been business building since the age of 24 and have also, as you mentioned, written a book on the benefits of inclusion and diversity to drive innovation and long-term value creation in business. So really all of my work is about how we drive economic empowerment through inclusion and innovation. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome. All right, y'all. Hunter is going to take over with hosting Hephzi. So I unfortunately don't get that honor, but I can't wait to sit back seat and listen in. So I'm going to turn the floor over to y'all. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Meg. It's great to be here. Hephzi, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for being here with Power to Fly. My name is Hunter. I'm one of the moderators here, and I'm so excited to jump in with you. So I'd love to hear, you got to tell us a little bit about yourself, and so I'd love to jump in. We have the next half an hour to talk about this topic. So let's just get right into it. So what do you think are some of the biggest changes companies in the UK and Europe need to make in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging?
Well, I think a big change is coming with the regulation that we're seeing across a number of industries. So Europe-wide, we've got the ESRS. Consultation has closed, and we will be hearing next year what they're going to be bringing in terms of social sustainability and DEIB requirements for compliance across companies. And if you look in the UK specifically, you've got the FCA's D&I consultation paper currently open. If anyone's in that sector, then do look at that, because those are going to be actually quite stringent requirements. And our current estimate from the data that we've been measuring of over 500 funds across asset management is that 90% of companies will not be able to comply. So there's a real regulatory readiness issue. For example, in the FCA regulation, they're going to be requiring 6 diversity protected characteristics for mandatory reporting. 80% of companies only have 2, and those are mainly gender and ethnicity, as you can probably imagine. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think the regulation is going to really put this on the agenda in a new and maybe slightly more painful way than the amazing grassroots work that we've seen from big social movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and that very important activist and lobbying work that has been going on around this. And so I see this as a sort of top down, bottom up pincer approach on corporates. And there's some brilliant work happening in this space, but actually getting this data is really difficult, because you can't just go and ask, what is your sexuality, from nowhere. People are not going to disclose. You're going to get prefer not to say ticked the entire time, because where is the trust? Why should people tell you this? Why should they trust the organization with this information? And I personally think they're going to trust the organizations even less when they know that that information is going to a regulator. How does it get used? So there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And the other thing, the big theme here is around AI and the disruption that that's going to bring, and is bringing, I would say, to the world of work. And there's, I think, a big issue around the lack of diversity within AI and data science. I had a quick look actually on your Power to Fly platform. I saw you have 30,000 open roles, and a third of those are in data science. Now, I don't know what your candidate sourcing pipeline is like, but I know the experience here that many of our clients are facing for these open roles is a deep lack of diversity. And this agenda is going to run away with us unless we really put resources into upskilling, training, lifelong learning, and intentional inclusive recruiting practices into this very important area. So those are the big 2 themes as I see them.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear all of that, and especially when speaking to the disruption with AI right now and all of the regulations that are coming in. How do you feel that, there seems to be an arms race with AI itself, but there also seems to be a race of regulations between, like, the UK, I'm in the States, and people are trying to put a flag in where they think this should be going and how that's going. How do you think it's going over in the UK with the proposals and how that's shaping up?
I'm very supportive of the regulation coming in as a concept. Do I think it's perfect? Absolutely not. Do I think there's work to be done around shaping and informing that and of how that gets phased in? Absolutely. And we're in consultation with our clients, helping to shape that. So I'd really just encourage anyone that, and it's an open call for responses on all of these pieces of regulation, that people actively participate in providing feedback, and especially if you represent underrepresented communities. We need to hear from the full breadth of diversity. This is not just any one particular group's domain. This is about how we create workplaces that are really inclusive, right? It doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, that they really have potential to access those opportunities and progress all the way through to the top levels. So a lot of this is around education and engagement. On the arms race point, yes, this whole topic has been deeply politicized and weaponized. That has happened. We have to accept that. And I think we have to equip ourselves with the best of the data and the best of the research to engage in that arms race. And what I'm seeing is a lot of pushback on what I would say is maybe quite lazy, insubstantial research that has been used. And I don't want to sort of name names of other organizations. And in fact, I've made the mistake of citing their studies as well. But I would encourage this audience to equip yourself with the best of the academic science and the research, because we do need that. We need to rest our foundations of the principles of why we're doing this work on the science, and there is good science out there. And I would encourage you to look at the meta-analyses around diversity leading to better business performance outcomes from Post and Brian. You can find that online. It's a 2015 meta-analysis study. That is a good place to start from. And then just inform yourself, keep educating yourself on this topic. The work is not yet done. And like with any sort of by the way, and it's evolving all the time, there's more research coming out, and I think digging deep into where that's coming from and the academic institutions behind that is really important.
Absolutely. And I was also struck by when you were speaking earlier about how there is a lack of trust between people divulging personal information, and that information being helpful in some ways. And it's like, where's that information going? I don't know what's going to happen. How can companies and employees and applicants build what needs to happen in that trust breakdown so that we know what's happening with that information, and why should I even tell them?
Absolutely. Well, I think it definitely starts from the top. I think leadership need to have a long, hard look at themselves and say and understand what this actually means to them personally as leaders, and to the businesses that they're running, the culture of the companies. And there needs to be a very clear narrative that people understand. This is what diversity means here. This is what inclusion means here, because these terms are very fluid and they can mean different things to different people. So I think being very clear on what you're talking about, what you're meaning, and then why you are asking for this information and how you are going to treat it. And also, when I see companies make this mistake time and time again, it doesn't matter how many times we tell them to do this, it's like, report back. This is people's personal data. You can't just take this data and use it for your ESG reporting or for your regulatory reporting and not share it back. That's not okay. And that mistake is made so many times, and that erodes trust as well. So there's a lot around leadership, culture, strategy, communication, and then, responsible, anonymous, confidential, secure data gathering and reporting. And it comes at the end of quite a long process, and that's really underappreciated. There's a bit of a concern that actually with the regulation coming in, there's going to be a scramble to get this data, where all that pre-work and that preparation and that consultation hasn't happened. So, it's going to be a bumpy road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so wise what you're talking about. From the top down, they really need to ask the question, why do we need this data? And you said so beautifully, report back. It's like, then it's communication. Then I'm in the loop. Then I understand what's going on. And I feel like so many times they're just asking, companies might just be asking blanket questions without that intention of why. And so it can seem like, why do we even need to know this, right? You're like just asking the DE&I questions. But it's like, well, if they're just kind of blanket questions, shouldn't they
to tick a box?
Yeah,
to tick a box, and that no one wants to be, and nobody wants to be in a box, nor their identities to be in a box. And that actually reminds me of something else, sort of a common error / then opportunity if you do it well in this DI data gathering process, which is that so many surveys that I've seen and looked at, and even some surveying tools out there, like Workday, you know, very narrow definitions of diversity across only a few characteristics, protected characteristics, without the opportunity for self-identification and self-disclosure. I would say on every single category that you think people might identify with, allow them to A, not identify with that, and B, self-identify within that group in a way that relates to them. You are going to learn so much. Yes, the data might be harder to standardize and interpret, but that's the complexity of human identity. So don't reduce it because people will not respect that process. People aren't stupid.
Yeah, you know, sometimes even when I'm filling out a medical form and I just see male and female, I'm like, excuse me, like, hello, excuse me, it's 2023, it's almost 2024, what's happening? Yeah. So it
exactly.
is
Exactly. And you know what, I think you've got a lot of you know, young professionals on this call building their careers, right, using Power to Fly to do that. You can inform senior management about this. I mean, I bet you know more. I bet you know more. So don't be afraid to actually send that feedback and hold a higher account and say, you know what I'd like when I see the next DIB data gathering, I'd love to be asked to self-identify on every single category. Please, could we introduce that?
Yeah, great advice. And giving people the permission to feel like they can speak up is so important, because there can be, oh, I don't want to cause a problem, I don't want to cause any waves, and hopefully there's a channel in which people at their work have this anonymous way or a safe way of giving that feedback, right?
Yeah, yes. And what it was very important is find those senior champions. So we always say when we're just building this strategy for companies is like, who's the most senior person? Like, I want to speak to the CEO, the managing partner, the founding partner. They've got to be involved in this from the beginning. But as close as you can get to the top, try and find the champion, the advocate, the senior member on the committee that you could talk to and engage with, because then they can bring it up in Exco or whatever forum it's going to get the attention as well. So don't just place it. I mean, HR is so important on this topic, but it's not the only place for it. Right.
So what, you know, your DE&I is your life, right? You're very passionate about this, and thank you for what you're doing, because it's such important work. What would you say are some of the most common misconceptions in DE&IB?
I mean, when I saw you wanted to ask this question, I was like, I mean, we run a 2-hour workship on this. So let me.
Sorry, the next two speakers, we're just going to push you back a little bit, and Hephzi and I are going to keep going.
Because there's so many myths and misunderstandings in this space, I'm going to just pick out one of my top ones, which is applies to all of us, that we all think we're less biased than the average person. We all have that misconception that we are actually more egalitarian, fairer, and unbiased, but we all hold biases. And part of the reason why we're not able to effectively evaluate the level of our bias is because of the complexity of bias itself and how it operates. And it's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is that basically incompetent individuals are unaware of their incompetence because you lack the skill needed to recognize that incompetence. And you actually have to train yourself and educate yourself. And you actually have to have quite a lot of systems redesign and tools and techniques to manage the levels of cognitive bias that are playing out all the time. So let me sort of outline this. If I was left to my own devices, and actually in my first business this did happen within the first few years, like, we all like to hire in our own likeness. That is a bias that we all hold. I built a team mainly of you know, feisty, women in their 20s and 30s, I realized, oh my goodness, we're completely out of balance here. At the time, I wasn't running a firm focused on inclusion or innovation at all. It was in financial services and it was all around HR consulting and recruitment. But I had to really address that, proactively address that. And it doesn't happen by accident. And it doesn't happen just because you are a DEI champion. You have to be very, very intentional. You have to be very structured. You have to redesign processes. You have to manage for how data is getting fed through, how decisions are being made, groupthink, social proof, recency bias. All of these things play into how we make decisions and how inequalities come into everyone's work and everyone's life. So, everyone has a part to play in this. No one's free of the bias.
Yeah, and it's baked in whether we like it or not. We are social creatures, and it's about unlearning and doing the work to recognize these unconscious biases. Thank you for sharing that example that you created a group of feisty women in their 20s, as you described. And it's like, to me, that sounds like an awesome group to work with.
I mean, people did like working with us, but yeah.
But I understand it's still one kind of, category of humans, and you recognize the imbalance. And like a lot of people go their whole careers of just hiring people that they are like them, and they don't even realize that they're doing it.
Yeah, and some of the most important boards and leadership teams completely lack any diversity. And so how high quality are those decisions, and who's being represented and whose interests are being represented in those rooms? That's the issue. I'm really concerned to see what happened with the OpenAI board and how deeply lacking in diversity it now is. There's a lot of regressive behavior in the market at the moment. Yeah. It's because there's a lot of short-termist thinking. That's really the issue that's going on at the moment. Inclusion and diversity is a long-term value creation strategic activity within business, and in a short-term market environment where interest rates are so high, people are struggling to actually deliver on returns on their portfolio, or having to make huge cuts in their wage bill. People stop thinking about the long-term strategic work that drives value. So we have to try and keep that on the agenda, keep these things in balance, the short-term business needs with the long-term value drivers.
Yeah, the OpenAI example, I just was reading this article just the other day on, I believe it was on Wired, and how there's all these senior level women that were offered to be the one woman on the board, and they're all like, nope.
No, thank you. Poison chalice.
Exactly. And
Damocles sword. No, that sounds like a terrible role. No, thank you.
Yeah, no thanks. I don't want to check that box, right? Here we are. We're talking about like box checking, and to speak to your point, short-term thinking, which in my mind does not equal psychological safety for anyone coming in.
Yeah.
And if you don't create an environment where someone wants to come in, you've already stacked the deck, right? Like that's not diversity if you're just putting one person in to be the only of some type of person in a room.
Yeah, and actually the research would show that they aren't going to be successful. You need to have at least three. You need to have at least three around the table of the underrepresented group. The one is 9 out of 10 times going to fail because they will not be able to get the support, the sounding board, the reinforcement that you need from other voices around different and sometimes opposing views.
That's really interesting. At least three. So what does that mean in terms of how large the group is? Is that a ratio, like 3 to something?
From 10.
From 10.
So you can scale up from there. So yeah, the study was done with 10. They started 1, 2, 3. Beyond 3, then they started to see the changes actually being implemented, the points being heard, amplified, and implemented.
Interesting. I like, that's a helpful little bite-sized thing you can put in your pocket, right? Like 3 to 10, anything else is you're just checking boxes, or you're not setting them up for success.
Yeah, and I think the three doesn't necessarily need to be like 3 women, 3 Black people. It could be just 3 of a very united agenda and alliance together that is extremely clear in terms of values, vision, strategy, and really speaking to those similar points that they're wanting to bring to the meeting or the agenda or the board.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure you have a lot more, not only bite-sized bits, but in-depth information, because in 2021, I believe you published the Diversity Playbook, which is a practical guide for DE&I in business. Can you tell us about some of the solutions and findings you share and explore in that playbook?
Yeah, so what I really go to do in that is to break down the process of what we've been working with clients over the past 6 years. So as I talked about, how do you engage leadership? How do you create a more inclusive mindset? What are some of the practical exercises you can do around that? Some of the insights from the coaching of senior leaders on this topic that we've developed. And then, of course, how you build out the communication strategy. How do you influence day-to-day behavioral changes? Because a lot of this is about culture and behavior change within organizations. Then, of course, how do you actually go about getting access to the data? How do you manage the legislative differences across different European countries, and of course the cultural and historical contexts around some of these demographic characteristics. And then we go on to thinking about other intervention strategies for hiring and attracting and retaining more diverse talent pools. How do you think about incentive structures within this whole topic? And different like mentoring and reverse mentoring, sponsorship, allyship. There's lots of insights based on pulling together up until 2021, the academic research, and then the business best practice that we'd seen from working in finance and technology across European companies. I would say now from 2023, I really need to write the second edition, because so much has happened in the last 2 years. And I think a lot is going to happen. We're on the cusp, I think, of another wave of change and of learning and innovation in this area. So yeah, there's a lot of content that's building to add. But I still deliver a number of talks and workshops on the topic, and the principles stand the test of time. The principles definitely stand the test of time. The research, the insights, the case studies could be updated every single month. I mean, did you see that story about Anna Boyko?
Please tell me. Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and I think it really highlights a little bit at this point the thematic point around AI and technology, and how we've got to be very mindful of what's happening. So Anna Boyko, a highly experienced software engineer, billed to speak at DevTernity, very, very big software conference next year. One of 3 women out of a speakers roster of 24. And that is until it was discovered that she's just a completely fake profile, and had been invented by the conference organizers to try and tick some diversity box, and whole profile background of her had been invented, her LinkedIn profile. Coinbase didn't know who she was. And, investigative work, journalism work has to happen to discover these things, because it is happening. People are just being invented to tick boxes. They're not even just being put in place for the one person. They're just being written out of the conference, of the dialogue, of the spaces of huge influence and innovation.
Yeah. Did you hear about Sports Illustrated?
Sports Illustrated is another one.
They made a whole roster of fake writers that were AI writers, but they did exactly what you said. They made pictures, they made bios. Like, what do you can't pull the veil over like that, because people will hopefully do the work like you said, and you will get caught. You will be found out.
Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be more stories breaking like that over the next year, and then there's going to be innovation to respond to that problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that innovation, because we really need it, and I'm looking forward to your updated playbook, because we're keep doing it. Please keep doing it.
Thank you. I will.
Oh yeah. Is there a way for folks to be able to read your work or the playbook, or where
Yeah,
people
please.
in touch with you? Yeah.
I write a lot on LinkedIn. That's my main channel. I also have a blog. You can read a lot of some of the background information that I've been talking about through the quality group, the research section of the website, and then on LinkedIn, I've written a lot of articles. Please follow me and comment, and I love to engage in a conversation. I love to hear what's going on in the US as well. It's a very, very important market. It's very different. I was just in New York 2 weeks ago, and it was really fascinating to have a debate around, you know, how we understand diversity and how we think about this data gathering. And in some respects, you're very, very far ahead. The EOC regulation has meant there's a lot of standardization, there's a lot of data, you know, you have a richness of data set, and at the same time you have the most horrendous regressive policies around parental leave and caring leave, and no one takes a holiday, and probably a huge mental health crisis as a result. But you know, this is where we can be learning from each other and sharing best practice.
Yeah, well, not currently today, but I reside in New York. So Hephzi, next time you're in town, you just
Oh, yes,
let me
please.
know. Yes,
I
yes.
love New York. I love the
yeah.
entrepreneurial energy. And you know what was great about being there? I find in Europe, we're still explaining like why sustainability data is such a massive space and why it's so needed. In New York, it wasn't a moment. It was like how big and how much and how innovative. And I loved that approach. And I think we need more of that in Europe. And I think in a way what the US would benefit from in Europe is some of our thinking around the rigor of the regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Hephzi, we only have 2 minutes left. As you said, we could easily talk for 2 more hours. I'm loving this. You're a delight and very inspiring to talk to. In this last minute or two, I know, you know, forecasting is a very tricky business. I don't recommend it, but on an optimistic point of view, like, where do you see the evolution of DE&I in business, and where can we go? Where would you like it to go in the next year, 5 years, 10 years?
Okay, so what I really, really want is no more fighting over the same small pie in the DEIB space. You know, it's not women versus BIPOC versus LGBT plus. We need systematic collective action, because combined we are the majority. We need to stop thinking of ourselves as the minority. We need to think of ourselves as the majority. We need to be equipped with the science, the data, and, you know, the confidence to be unashamedly demanding of what we need to see in the workplace. And that's what I am optimistic for that. I am working for that. And I think that revolution in this space is coming.
Yes, mic drop from Hephzi. Let's do it. Well, Hephzi, this has been absolutely wonderful. I hope to see you in New York. I'm going to add you on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for making the time today. This has been really, really, really lovely to connect with you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I really look forward to just, you know, connecting with your community and seeing what you're doing. It's really exciting. So thanks very much.